Hey y'all, Scott Horton here for the Council for the National Interest at councilforthenationalinterest.org. CNI stands against America's negative role in the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict, the war party's relentless push to bomb Iran, and the roles played by twisted Christian Zionism and neocon-engineered Islamophobia in justifying it all. The Council for the National Interest works tirelessly to expose and oppose our government's most destructive policies, but they can't do it without you. Support CNI's push to straighten out America's crooked course. Check out the Council for the National Interest at councilforthenationalinterest.org and click Donate under About Us at the top of the page. That's councilforthenationalinterest.org. All right, I'm Scott Horton. It's the Scott Horton Show. You can find the full archives at scotthorton.org. And our next guest today is the great Eric Margolis. He is a journalist and author, most recently of American Raj, Liberation or Domination. He keeps a website at ericmargolis.com, spelled like Margolis, ericmargolis.com. And his latest piece is called War Risk Rises Sharply in Korea. Eric, don't do a W and two R's in a row. I can't talk, right? Welcome back to the show.
You're doing great.
Very happy to have you here. We'll work on your titles in the future, I guess. No. Listen, TV said I should be terribly afraid that North Korea is going to invade Washington State. No, I don't know. That was a movie. But the new dictator, the grandson, now, he's making scary noises, and TV seems to think that they're pretty scary. So I was hoping that maybe you could tell me how afraid I should be, first of all, here.
Well, Scott, I think the best measure of this crisis, and it is a real crisis, is the fact that in South Korea, in Seoul, which is 30 miles from in artillery range of the demilitarized zone, life is going on as normal, and people are shopping and going to work and shrugging off this as the latest, annual crisis with North Korea.
Okay, you hear that, conservatives? You can climb out from under your beds now.
That's right. First of all, this has become I call this Korean kabuki because it's become an annual stylized ritual. What happens? Every March, the U.S. And South Korea, and until 2 years ago, the South Korean armed forces used to be under American military command. Imagine that. The U.S. and South Korean forces, this year joined by Australia, staged what had to be called menacing war games hard on the North Korean border, both air, land, and sea. War games designed to mimic an attack on North Korea. What made it, and every year the North Koreans go ballistic and jump up and down, make all kinds of threats and fire some artillery shells. But this year was a bit different because, first of all, North Korea tested a nuclear weapon some months back that brought renewed tightened sanctions on North Korea by the U.S. and other nations. And secondly, the rhetoric increased. And then thirdly, because of this, the U.S. trying to up the pressure on North Korea and its new young, inexperienced leader, Kim Jong-un, flew, first of all, B-52s, less than 30 miles from the North Korean border. A stark reminder how that in the Korean War in the 1950s that the U.S. carpet bombed all of North Korea and literally bombed it back to the Stone Age. Then, just yesterday, a flock of F-22 Raptor, a most modern fighter, flew from Japan to South Korea, flew along the Korean border and drove the North Koreans into a frenzy, and they threatened all kinds of nuclear annihilation and things, which everyone knew that they're not capable of doing there.
Wow. All right. So, lots to go over there. First of all, I think from the pictures I saw, hate to correct you, but I think it was B-2 H-bomb delivery devices there that they flew, stealth bombers, which B-52s, I could see that being, threatening like a napalm carpet bombing type of thing. But a B-2 seems to be a threat that will drop an H-bomb on you.
I forgot to mention the B-2. Well, it was first B-52.
Or was it both? Oh, it was both.
And now it's the more modern B-2 stealth bomber. What makes that unique is that the North Koreans don't have much of an anti-aircraft capability, but and they probably would never see the B-2s flying over them. But the B-2 is the only American aircraft that can carry the dreaded MOAB, M-O-A-B, super bomb. So it was the mother of all bombs. It's a 30,000-pound bomb. It's the biggest explosive device this side of nuclear weapons. It's a thermobaric device, meaning it uses like a fuel air explosive to create huge overpressures. It's like a small nuclear device. And this bomb was designed to go after deeply buried underground facilities, nuclear installations, and even more important, command and control, i.e. the leadership bunker of Kim Jong-un and his general staff would be target number one for a B-2 attack. Mm-hmm. So that's why the North Koreans reacted so violently to this particular.
So the B-2, it wasn't a threat necessarily that will drop a H-bomb and vaporize Pyongyang as much as this is what we'll use to take out all your hardened artillery and all your command and control and whatever tunnel you try to hide in, pal.
The U.S. 7th Fleet, which is in the area, has its own nuclear weapons and could vaporize North Korea in an hour if it wanted to. So the North Koreans are constantly under threat of U.S. nuclear attack. That's one of the reasons they developed their own rather primitive nuclear weapons, is to forestall an attack. The North Koreans cannot strike North America with a nuclear weapon, and wouldn't anyway, because they, what's the point of lobbing two nuclear devices at the U.S. when you know you're going to be blown off the face of the map?
Well, could they even nuke Seoul? I mean, could they even deliver the nukes they got?
They might be able to. Neither U.S. nor, amazingly, South Korean intelligence knows whether they can deliver a nuclear device. But if they can, if they've miniaturized one and got it in a warhead small enough, the real target is Japan. And U.S. bases in Japan, and as North Korea said, they would attack U.S. bases in Guam. Guam's become a big floating aircraft carrier for and Okinawa. So there is that possibility. Secondly, I've been up in the DMZ repeatedly, and the North Koreans have 11,000 heavy artillery pieces and rocket batteries, long-range rocket batteries, buried into caves on the DMZ facing Seoul. 35 miles away, they can destroy with repeated barrages a large portion of the South Korean capital, which has 11 million people. So that's even a bigger threat in a way than a nuclear weapon.
I've read a lot of different things about that. Some people saying, that it's a real serious threat and there's not too much the Americans could do. It would take them a long time dropping those MOAB bombs to really destroy all those hardened artillery emplacements, that kind of thing. But I've read other things that said, too, I think somebody was quoting Anthony Kordsman is saying, you got to have a lot of artillery as far as density to really destroy much. They could kill some people, but is it a real threat to Seoul? Probably not. I wonder what you think of that.
Well, I think Kordsman's a very well-informed analyst, and I have great respect for him. But they could cause a tremendous amount of damage with that kind of shelling. It wouldn't take Seoul off the map, but it would cause panic. It would destroy much of the government buildings in the north, and it would be huge damage. Set fires, disrupt transport, and it depends how long they keep firing. Look at Verdun in World War I, where a million shells were fired at one fort. It can be done.
Mm-hmm. All right, now, I want to get back to all this current stuff, but first, I can't help but ask you about what you mentioned about the Korean War that Harry Truman started and Ike Eisenhower called the ceasefire. I wouldn't say finished back then in the 40s and 50s. Really, they called it the Forgotten War. That's one of the only things anybody knows about it, is that it's called the Forgotten War, and that's the one where Trapper John and Hawkeye Pierce were over there cracking jokes with Radar, O'Reilly, and all them. But I grew up watching MASH, and they actually never really show the war. They just show, the MASH unit, what's going on in their little part of the war, and they never taught me, I don't think, a word on that. And I must have seen every episode when I was a little kid of that show. I don't think they ever mentioned carpet bombing the North once, or the reality of American air power versus the helpless North Koreans. And I think we've all seen video footage of carpet bombing of Vietnam, and then it's easy to imagine that that kind of thing happened a lot more than just the footage we've seen. But when it comes to the war against North Korea, particularly, say, for example, the air war against North Korea, I think probably most of us know even less than me about it. And the only thing I know about it is that guy Bruce Cummings. I read one article he wrote about this one time, about all the napalm and whatever, and that's all I know about it. So could you kind of give us a little bit of a history of that and just how bad all that was?
In 1950, there was, when the war ended, the U.S. was left in control of the south of the Korean Peninsula, south of the 38th parallel, and the Korean communists, who were backed and formed and run by the Soviet Union, had the North. There was huge bad blood between the communist leadership of Kim Il-sung and between the South Korean leader Syngman Rhee, who was a fanatical Christian who wanted to, fight to the death against communism. And the two sides really led the peninsula into a war. North Korea attacked first with full Soviet backing and Russian T-34 tanks, and initially caught the U.S. flat-footed and beat the U.S. forces badly. The U.S. response was mainly through air power because its ground troops put up a miserable performance. So the U.S. used B-29 heavy bombers, same things that had destroyed at least a third of all Japanese cities, or half, to do the same thing in North Korea. And they which was already a very primitive, backwards country, but they flattened everything that was flattenable. Seoul, Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea, was just rubble. Seoul was changed hands 3 times, and it was rubble at the end of the war. But the psychology of the U.S. B-29s coming over really terrified the North Koreans. This incessant carpet bombing, the same way it did to the Japanese. To this day, Japanese have not gotten over the bombing of Japan and the mass destruction. So, and look, North Korea, in the end, after 2 years of fighting, it became a stalemate. In spite of MacArthur's brilliant landing at Incheon, which caught the North Korean army from behind, China intervened in the war, sent 1 million troops south over the Yalu River, and pushed the U.S. all the way back again. So in the end, after a huge amount of loss, 50-odd thousand dead Americans, 2 million dead Koreans at least, maybe more. And we were responsible for a lot of civilian casualties. The story has never come out. In the end, Korea remained exactly where the war began, on the 38th parallel. And the war's never ended today. It was ended by an armistice, but never a peace agreement.
Mm-hmm. And now, so I guess to bring us back to the current, well, actually, one more thing about back then. Could you tell us, do you have any estimate, or do you remember what you've read about how many North Koreans died, civilians and or military deaths from that war back then?
I don't trust my memory on this, but the numbers were very large. On the Chinese side, perhaps over 100,000 dead. Certainly Korean civilians, of the 2 million Koreans civilians killed, I don't know how much were in the north and how much were in the south, but there were a lot of dead, maybe more than we even know.
Because I guess, when it comes to Vietnam, we sort of hear, this is just sort of conventional wisdom, roughly 3 million, maybe as many as 5, somewhere in there, and Laotians and Cambodians, depending on how you count. I never even hear reference to North Korean dead or Korean dead from that war at all,
No, the story has just been swallowed up, or nobody ever bothered to look into it or to get behind all the war propaganda that was going back and forth. But there's one thing for certain. We have today's crisis is caused by the fact that this odious regime in North Korea, it is one of the world's ugliest regimes, has been under siege by the U.S. We tried to overthrow it. We wage economic warfare against North Korea, such as we've done against Cuba and Iraq and Iran, and to try to overthrow the government there. All kinds of plots. The North Koreans have tried to overthrow the South Korean government. There was an assassination attempt against the father of the current president of South Korea, the newly elected one, Park Geun-hye. General Park Chung-hee, North Koreans tried to assassinate him. So both sides have a lot to answer for, but they've been sparring back and forth. And once again, very conservative groups in Korea play a big role in the South in keeping this confrontation going.
Mm-hmm. And I think we've talked before. Maybe you could illustrate for us why you think, they still can't work it out after all of these years. I mean, does America, don't they want to help reunite the North and the South? Why wouldn't, for example, Obama try his best anyway to take advantage of Dennis Rodman and the Harlem Globetrotters, who are the coolest people in the whole world, who went over there and kind of to try to break the ice a little bit, have a conversation about basketball. That's a good setup for the next time we have a conversation about something else. Maybe work out a new agreed framework. Can they dig up Warren Christopher, something like that? And but they don't seem to ever want to take advantage of any opportunity, really. Seems like.
Well, yeah, I ran into Governor Bill Richardson. I was in Doha in January, and he had just come from North Korea, and we chatted about this. And there are thoughtful people in the U.S. government, like Richardson, others who for years have been trying to establish, normal relations with the North. But there is a powerful group in Washington, most of them neocons, who don't want normalized relations and have done everything, and who managed to sabotage the last agreement that was made in 1994 that caused North Korea to stop its nuclear weapons development. There's a feeling, there's concern because North Korea has gotten involved in the Middle East, and it's considered a dangerous country now, and the idea is it must be overthrown. It challenges American domination of the North Pacific. It's disobedient, and it's got to be squashed. But it's, it also justifies keeping 27,500 U.S. troops based in South Korea, who've been there since the 1950s, and dominating South Korea, which is still in a tremendous American influence. So America hates North Korea, but it finds itself as a useful enemy.
Mm. Well, yeah, you mentioned Bill Richardson there. The Clintonites actually had a pretty good deal going with that agreed framework that Bush blew up with his lies and aggressive posture, his sanctions and the PSI posse, that's what Gordon Prather called them, the Proliferation Security Initiative, which was basically a claim that we can seize your boats on the high seas if we feel like it, that kind of thing, in order to force them out of the NPT. Just horrible. But then, in the end of the Bush years, he at least sent Christopher Hill over there and tried to work out a little bit of a something, and we'll take you off the terrorism list if you agree to turn off your reactor that you just turned back on again, and this kind of thing, a little bit of that. But then what's Obama done? He's come in and he hasn't talked with him or tried to really work anything out. I don't know if he's as bad as Bush's first term, but he doesn't seem as good as Bush's second to me.
The Obama administration is too busy failing in the Middle East and in Afghanistan and vis-a-vis Iran to tackle another problem. Status quo seems to suit everybody in the region. Russia, for example, which is right next to North Korea, has been calling for talks for a long time. It's been ignored. The Japanese really don't want to see any settle. I mean, they're scared of North Korea's nuclear weapons, but on the other hand, they don't want to see a united Korea because the Koreans are really very anti-Japanese, and it would be a serious rival. So China's been ambivalent. It's gone backwards and forth, but it doesn't want to see a united Korea. So these different countries are happy to see things continue as they are, and they were, except that this year, because of North Korea's nuclear test, the U.S. decided to pressure North Korea and to try its new leader, Kim Jong-un, see how he responded. Well, it got its answer.
Right. I was so disappointed. Maybe it's only because I love the Harlem Globetrotters, and I want so bad to see them again someday. I saw them when I was like 7 or something with my buddy Jimmy, and man, it was just the greatest thing ever. And I think if you'd ask me anyway, for what that's worth, I'm not sure, Eric, but if you'd ask me, how do we warm up relations with the North Koreans, I would say you take the dozen coolest guys in red, white, and blue in the history of the world, and you send them over there to play a game of pickup basketball, for Christ's sake, man. Especially when Barack Obama, who actually plays basketball, is a tall black president of the United States. Here's something where we could, have a real opening, like when ugly old Madeleine Albright went and saw the fantastic gymnastics ceremony and all of that kind of thing. This is how you warm up relations. Send your gymnastics guys here. We'll send our basketball guys and our symphony orchestra and whatever over there, and then maybe we can open up a Walmart in Pyongyang and we can start working things out.
Well, that's grown-up behavior. Somebody sent me a great joke, Scott. I've got to share it with you. It's a series of pictures, and it shows the basketball star,
right, Rodman,
talking to, in his weird outfit, talking to Kim Jong-un with his weird haircut. And then the next frame, it shows Kim Jong-un turning to one of his aides, a general, saying, "You mean that's not President Obama?" It was a very cute joke. But yes, that is obviously the way. Remember, ping-pong diplomacy started détente with Red China. But there are people who don't want détente. And I come back to it that North Korea is considered a primary military technology supplier, particularly missiles to Pakistan, but even more so to Iran, to Syria, and the neocons in Washington want this regime overthrown because it threatens to ship strategic weapons to the Middle East.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I'm kind of amazed that their rockets are even that good, right? I mean, I was joking around talking with John Pfeffer from Foreign Policy in Focus, and I said, yeah, but John, they actually reached outer space, right? They put the satellite up there for a minute. That's kind of their Sputnik moment. Holy crap, maybe they're on the march, like in that movie Red Dawn, the remake. And he said, yeah, well, that was pretty much their entire GDP for a decade, winning that damn rocket. And there's just not much behind that. I mean, it seems like, I don't know, whatever missiles they're shipping to Syria or whatever, how awesome could they be? How many of them are there?
They're glorified Scuds and reverse engineered, and probably some of them work. They're inaccurate. They have a very bad reliability rate. But they're there. These are more psychological weapons than actually battlefield weapons. Everybody gets hysterical over these missiles, but they're so inaccurate. They're very little use without nuclear warheads. But they're still there, and it makes, for example, foes of Israel to think that they've got some kind of power because they've got some cheesy North Korean missiles that don't work.
I forgot who it was that I'm plagiarizing, but I remember reading somewhere about how a Scud is just basically a station wagon with a rocket on the back. It's like hurling a baseball or something like that.
Well, I compare it to a trebuchet. A trebuchet is a medieval device with a big pile of rocks at one end and a sling at the other, and it hurls a boulder. And that's about how good it was.
Yeah, well, and I think we all remember from the Gulf War, they succeeded, the Iraqis, the first Gulf War, they succeeded in hitting American targets in Saudi Arabia, twice?
That's right. But you've got to think too. I've got great respect for the Koreans, and the North Koreans are still Koreans. The Koreans are very smart, and they're very hardworking, and they're exceptionally determined people. And they just keep beating. South Korea was a desert practically at the end of the First Korean War, and the Koreans built up their country. Korea in 1955 was poorer than Black Africa was, if you can imagine that. And in the ensuing years, the Koreans created out of nothing. They built their whole country to become the 11th industrial power on Earth. Very modern. It's amazing. They're much more ahead of us when it comes to computer electronics and online stuff. But the North Koreans are of the same stock. It's just that, so we can't dismiss them entirely as bumbling communist fanatics. They may, in fact, develop some good things. They do make tanks. They've made some pretty good modern artillery pieces, and they're very determined.
Yeah, they just don't have prices, so their economy really sucks.
Well, that's right, but at least they're not running their country on Chinese loans. Maybe they are, like we are.
Yeah, exactly. Americans got to be real careful when we're pointing the finger red baiting around the world these days.
That's right.
Oh, man. All right. Thanks so much for your time, Eric. It's great to talk to you as always.
Pleasure as always, Scott. Cheers.
All right, everybody. That's the great Eric Margolis. EricMargolis.com. Spell it like Margolis, so you spell it right. EricMargolis.com. You can also find him all the time at LouRockwell.com. The latest piece here is War Risk Rises Sharply in Korea. And, also his books are War at the Top of the World and American Raj, Liberation or Domination. That's it for the show today. See you tomorrow.
So you're a libertarian, and you don't believe the propaganda about government awesomeness you were subjected to in 4th grade. You want real history and economics. Well, learn in your car from professors you can trust with Tom Woods' Liberty Classroom. And if you join through the Liberty Classroom link at scotthorton.org, we'll make a donation to support The Scott Horton Show. Liberty Classroom, the history and economics they didn't teach you.
Man, you need some Liberty stickers for the back of your truck. At LibertyStickers.com, they've got great state hate, like Pearl Harbor was an inside job. The Democrats want your guns. U.S. Army, die for Israel. Police brutality, not just for black people anymore. And government school, why you and your kids are so stupid. Check out these and 1,000 other great ones at LibertyStickers.com. And of course, they'll take care of all your custom printing for your band or your business at TheBumperSticker.com. That's LibertyStickers.com. Everyone else's stickers suck. Hey, y'all, Scott Horton here, inviting you to check out WallStreetWindow.com. It's a financial blog written by former hedge fund manager Mike Swanson, who's investing in commodities, mining stocks, and European markets. Wall Street Window is unique in that Mike shows people what he's really investing in and updates you when he buys or sells in his main account. Mike thinks his positions are going to go up because of all the money the Federal Reserve is printing to finance the deficit. See what happens at WallStreetWindow.com. And Mike's got a great new book coming out, so also keep your eye on writerMichaelSwanson.com for more details. Hey y'all, Scott here. Like I told you before, the Future Freedom Foundation at FFF.org represents the best of the libertarian movement. Led by the fearless Jacob Hornberger, FFF writers James Bovard, Sheldon Richman, Wendy McElroy, Anthony Gregory, and many more write the op-eds and the books, host the events, and give the speeches that are changing our world for the better. Help support the Future Freedom Foundation. Subscribe to their magazine, The Future of Freedom. Or to contribute, just look for the big red donate button at the top of FFF.org. Peace and freedom. Thank you.